Okay, so welcome back to Black Swan Outdoors, and today is a part 2 of the Jamie Smith loadout. He is former director of Blackwater, former CIA operative turned writer, and he had done a particular mission in Libya, which he talked about, and he gave us a list of the things that he had packed with him. Very contentious figure, but I thought it was an interesting list, and so again, these are just all food for thoughts. So let's run down his list. He has a larger pack that he had listed in here. It could be any pack that you'd wanted. I didn't have room in here, otherwise I'd throw a pack. If I was to grab a pack out of my packs, it would probably be something like the 511 72-hour pack or something like that, the Rush series. Because I really like that pack for global travel. It's my favorite go-to personal pack for travel. Anyway, so inside there, he kept his clothing. So this is just a random assortment of clothes that I had on here. So we had that. And then from sleeping gear, he had a sleeping bag, which this is just a fleece liner sleeping bag, which I like to keep in the back of my car personally, because I think for most situations, a liner is good enough for warmer conditions. Certainly if I needed it and wanted the cooler weather, I'd be throwing in a proper down sleeping bag. And then he had a sleeping pad, which I think is a good addition too, as well. So very, having a change of clothes and something to sleep with in an unexpected event, like where you had to go to stay at a friend's house or something like that. Certainly good thing. So, I mean, if you're looking at these videos and thinking about bug out bag videos, I think that's a pretty good, I think there's a good overlay on there that we're not all going to be operatives, traveling around the world doing super secret missions. But we can take some of these skills and apply them to our everyday life. And that's the whole point of doing all this. So aside from that, he did say a shelter or a tent. So I'm going to throw in this is my hiking backpacking tarp, which I think, again, if I needed more coverage, if I needed an actual tent, I would do that. There's pros and cons to tents. If I can get away with sleeping in a tarp, I tend to choose the tarp. It's way easier. And a good alternative to this, of course, would be a hammock as well. But if you don't know, the problem with a hammock is you need trees. So in an urban context or a rural context, you may not have trees, therefore you won't have coverage. Whereas with a tarp, you can make that work. So I find the tarp to be a little bit more advantageous, and we'll talk about that in the next video as well. So moving on, he had batteries for everything, just like in the previous 10-pound pack that he had. He had batteries for everything, so we're going to have batteries, duplicates on there. When you're talking about running your electronics like GPS and flashlights and satellite phones and things like that, if you're running out of juice, that can be critical. So batteries can be just as important as medical or ammo. He did say had a spare satellite phone, which I thought was odd that you'd have two, but if you're really relying on that, then I guess it kind of makes sense. So I have the same radio representing satellite phones as I did in the previous one. This is the exact same radio, but I do have a larger dipole antenna on here, and I have my extra battery pack to represent for batteries. He talked about having a fold-out charging panel, which I think is awesome, and it's something that I probably would consider if I did something similar to what he was doing. Certainly. I've traveled quite a bit in the global south and less developed areas, and in my experience, I find that having just a large battery pack that has some solar charging capability is all that you'd really need. In fact, just a large battery pack, you can find electricity by asking for it, and people can, But the whole idea here is to be self-contained. So you want to think about not interfacing with people. So you want to think about in terms of not coming across and coming around people where they're going to remember you or remember that conversation, things like that. And in that case, you want to be able to eat, drink, shelter yourself, be totally self-contained. So I get that. So this is just one, it will trickle charge essentially to charge itself up. It's not the greatest, but it works well. I think it works fine. Okay, so aside from communications, then for as far as water goes, he suggests, or he has one of the bottle type filters, the Sawyer filters. Such as something like this. These work well for an emergency. They work well as a backup. There's pros and cons to these. If it was me, I would be throwing in some iodine just to be safe, because once these things clog, and they will clog, you won't have any capacity to drink your water. So certainly on any kind of international trip where the water is suspect, I'm going to be carrying a filter and an iodine as well. So, you know, it is what it is. We have a video on water, or a handout on water sanitation on the website that you can download if you want more information on water sanitation. Food, he has, you know, more protein bars, MREs. You know, we could have multiple MREs. I think that'd be fine. And then kind of along with, you have he has a trauma first aid kit IFAK in his personal bag, but then, you know, for things like scrapes and sunscreen and other types of medical issues, having a larger first aid kit is certainly very, very handy, especially when you're traveling in the global south, because a lot of this type of supplies, these little supplies, are very hard to find often. You can find batteries, but you're not going to find oftentimes good, clean, you know, first aid supplies, of course, depending on where you're at. So I you know, I think, you know, that was certainly, it's been helpful for me, and I'm sure for other people to have a first aid kit of some kind. And then lastly would be toiletries. So, you know, for me, it's just a toothpaste, Castile soap, toothbrush, a comb, a razor, and then a small pack towel. And I think that would be fine. That would cover, and then the medications that I keep in this kit. But he put his medications in his travel kit. He talked a lot about taking ibuprofen throughout the book. With more, he took more ibuprofen than it was actually would do any good. He just kind of popped it like candy, which was kind of odd that he was so well trained in medical, but he'd overdid it with the ibuprofen. But that is not me. That's him. So again, he doesn't have any kind of flashlights or anything in that kit. You know, maybe it was in there, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it could be better put the headlamp in this kit versus the previous kit. But you know, I don't know. I just thought that was strange that you just rely on your night vision goggles instead of your flashlights. But whatever. So this was the part 2 for Jamie Smith's kit. I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, put them down below. And remember to like and subscribe, and there's more of these videos on the way if you're enjoying them. Okay, so one thing that I had forgotten to talk about that he packed was a tough book. And certainly those are great and have a lot of great capacity. Anyone that wants a tough as nails laptop but can't afford a tough book or like an alternative, perhaps maybe, I'm going to throw this out there, is consider purchasing a Chromebook. This particular Chromebook is one that you can pick up at Best Buy. They're designed for children. The price point is about $89. And it is, I'm not sure if it's mil spec in terms of its toughness, but it's designed specifically for kids. Dropping, water being spilled on it, all that kind of stuff. This is tough as nails. It's a fantastic kit. It's a fantastic laptop for rough purposes. So it's not as tough as a tough book, I would think, but it is very, very rugged. It's very capable, and it works, for me, works as a perfect travel laptop. Now, you can't do everything that you're used to doing with a laptop, so writing emails and doing some functionality. There is some limit in terms of what you can download on here. There is no memory, essentially, which is kind of goes to my next thing. Since it's Chrome based, it's not super anonymous in terms of use, but it is, because it's Chrome based. but it is very, very secure. You can save everything either on the cloud, or you can save everything on a encrypted SD card, which is what I do. So I log in as a guest every time I use this computer. I don't have an account for this, don't have a Google account. So every time I use this, it's basically just for limited things. So this might be something that works well for some people. Again, it's a little bit cheaper, and you know, if I lost this, it's no big deal, or someone steals it, versus my other laptop with all my data and everything on there. The other thing about Chrome is it is very, very secure, so there is an advantage to that. So if you're worried about malware and things like that, it does well. Yeah, so otherwise, if you want another computer, different options, that covert communications posting that we talked about, it talks about how you can use a laptop computer without being detected. That's both very secure and very anonymous. So check that post out if you're interested in that subject. So that's the laptop.